Ticklish business any way you look at it. Come on, we'll stick together.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Ticklish Business, a podcast all about honoring and celebrating old Hollywood. And we are talking Roddy McDowall this episode. I'm kind of surprised. I think in 10 years of doing the show, we've had to have done an episode about a movie with Roddy McDowall, but I think this is the first time we've actually talked about him in general. We're also going to be talking about the utterly cuckoo bananas 1966 film Lord Love a Duck. And to join me in this really special episode is the author of Roddy McDowall, an Actor's Life, Samuel Garza Bernstein. Samuel, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for letting me have this conversation and talk about this wild movie. But of course, before we get into that, love to remind everybody that if you have not been over at our Patreon at patreon.com/ticklishbiz, you should hop on over. We're going to be doing some mixers on Zoom, talking about old Hollywood. You get episodes 48 hours early. I do swag bags. We do our secret Santa gift exchange at the end of the year. You can join all of that starting at just $1 and help support Ticklish Biz HQ, keep the lights on, and let us do fun episodes like our episode we did with David Zucker, our episode we did with Sean Hepburn, for all sorts of fun things. That's at patreon.com/ticklishbiz. We are always on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you haven't been over there, consider leaving us a rating and a review. Gets more eyeballs on the show. And if you are watching us via YouTube at youtube.com/@ticklishbusiness, hello! Video. It's the new thing. We are trying to buff up our YouTube numbers, so consider subscribing to that. We do a lot of little short video clips and fun stuff as well. And of course, we are on all social media at Ticklish Biz, with the exception of Twitter, where we are at Ticklish_biz. So head on over. A lot of fun stuff happening. So I want to go back to you, Samuel. Talk a little bit about how you discovered Roddy McDowall, and how did that translate into wanting to take the step to write a biography about him?
Well, I've always been aware of Roddy. I mean, I think as a child, he was ubiquitous across, every television drama that was on any network on television. He was a guest star. And, you saw him sort of all the time. And I think in some respects, he was kind of, I wouldn't have known how to articulate this as a little kid, but I think he was kind of the embodiment of a kind of who I want to be when I grow up kind of idea. I knew I was gay, but I didn't really want to grow up and be Paul Lynde, or Rip Taylor or something. But I think I understood that on some level that Roddy McDowall, this kind of glamorous, cool Hollywood legend, that was sort of aspirational for me. So I think that was, if you go back, the prototype of who I thought I might be one day. When it comes to who you're going to write about, these are conversations that have to do with my agent, the publisher, editor, who different names pop up. And my agent actually had suggested Roddy. I was shocked to learn that no one had written a book yet. And there's kind of this weird lore that his archives were embargoed for 100 years. And I heard this rumor and I was like, well, is that a real thing? And of course, no, it was not a real thing. And to be fair, his archives had been embargoed for 25 years after his death. So they opened up in 2023. And we were starting to have conversations in 2024, I guess, about this. So the archives were open. He always said during his lifetime that he would never write a book. He left his archives there, and there are 521 boxes of stuff.
Wow. That's a writer's dream, right? I talk a lot on the podcast about the people that I would love to write books on. And all of these people died indigent or died young. There's no big box of stuff for them. You're living the dream right there, having so much material.
Well, to look at these very unfiltered letters between someone like Roddy and Noel Coward or Olivier, all of these people, Elizabeth Taylor, It's kind of a little bit of a fantasy, really, to be able to eavesdrop on the private lives of these people, not in a scandal ridden way, but in a kind of a just, oh, well, this is what they were really thinking. And of course, Roddy kept copies not just of the letters he received, but there were copies of the letters he wrote. You also got to see the juxtaplay between what one friend said about the other friend, and then that friend saying about the other friend, and how Roddy stayed very, very neutral. He was Switzerland with regard to these interchanges.
When I think of Roddy McDowall, you're right. His sexuality is something that, even though people might not have been aware of it, and he certainly didn't play necessarily queer coded characters. This permeated a lot of old Hollywood. Like Marlon Brando, I think, got wrapped up in this a lot. And so
Yeah.
I was always fascinated by like this real, not underground community, but you hear stories about like the Hollywood sewing circle and
Yeah.
the LGBTQ stars of that time. And that's a really sticky topic for old Hollywood lovers because
One of the great things about the archive is I discovered the complete normalization of his partners. I mean, from the agents, from the studio executives, publicists, everybody, everyone that he exchanged any kind of correspondence with on any level, they all knew who his partner was at any given time. It was always, give my love to John. John, he sent me the funniest card. He's such a card, that card. It was completely normalized. And I mean, we're going back to the late 50s. I'm not talking about, the 70s or 80s when
yeah.
things loosened up. I'm talking about 20th Century Fox is sending him and his partner to Rome. And it is very clear the sleeping arrangements because they're arranging hotel rooms. Just those kinds of things that were very normal. Not, nothing salacious, but just this is my real life. It really kind of made me feel very happy for him to know that he lived with that kind of authenticity without that sense of like, oh my God, I have to hide every 5 minutes.
Yeah.
He was great friends with Rock Hudson. Rock Hudson was in a very different situation, and he was a romantic lead in a way that Roddy was not. And so Roddy had, I think, a lot more freedom.
100%, 100%. And it's funny that I was reading Roddy's wiki page, and his personal life section is just a paragraph, and it mentions nothing about his sexuality at all, which is very, very odd to me. Wiki's not the arbiter of truth, of course, but it's very, very weird that like that hasn't been updated to reflect, considering Rock Hudson, because Hollywood is so littered with those stories. Rock Hudson living this kind of quote unquote tragic life in the closet, Billy Haynes going all the way back to the silent era, having to walk away from Hollywood. What do you think it was about Roddy that allowed him to live authentically and continue to make features?
As an adult, he was essentially a character actor. He was definitely the star of some movies, but even with something like, as we're going to talk about Lord Love a Duck, he was the lead and it was a romantic role in a way, but certainly in a very offbeat way. He wasn't on the cover of whatever the equivalent in the 1960s of Tiger Beat.
I was going to say Teen Beat. Yeah, whatever that is.
That wasn't his gig. The English thing, a little bit of a kind of an effete quality that people associate with that. I think you're just sort of comfortable with it in a way, as long as it's not in your face, and of course, in those times, it would have been unheard of to introduce your romantic partner as your spouse.
Especially watching Lord Love a Duck, because Pretty Poison is kind of similar, and that has Anthony Perkins. Anthony Perkins, we also know, dabbled with bisexuality and had his own connections to the LGBTQ world of that time. Him and Roddy, I think, also have very quasi-similar career paths in the sense they both looked similar, both kind of tall, lanky guys. Roddy did not, he worked for Monogram, not necessarily at the huge studios. Tony Perkins tended to take weirder films. Like, they're kind of akin to each other. But watching this, what Roddy McDowall brings to so many of his movies that Anthony Perkins does not is, I don't want to say it's a non-threatening quality, but it's more of this like commanding presence of the sense that in Lord Love a Duck, this is a character that I think he flirts very skillfully with that fine line between, is it obsession? Is it love? Is it just to like take the piss out of whatever is stir the pot type of
Right.
thing? Which I think is very, very interesting. For a person that had leading man good looks and often was the lead in some of these smaller films for these smaller studios, he really has such a interesting character trajectory compared to a bigger actor, but akin in someone like Anthony Perkins.
Psycho aside, Roddy a vastly larger career than
Yeah.
Anthony Perkins did. And, of course, started as a child and was really one of the biggest stars in the world in the early 40s. When he was kind of the face of British war relief. And I mean, he was so important beyond making movies. He was important to government aims, to war aims. I think it made him kind of a household friend, family member kind of idea in the 40s, before that existed with television. He felt like somebody that you knew, that was your friend. And I think that stayed with him throughout his career as an adult. So that even when he played a character, as he does in Lord Love a Duck, that is kind of borderline, psychopath, you still kind of felt like, but you'd still kind of like to spend the day with him. I don't know that I felt that way after watching Psycho. Like, oh, I want to spend the day with Anthony Perkins. Yeah, no, I don't. I don't.
No, no, and some of those later 60s films like Pretty Poison is one of those where you're just kind of like, nope, I'm getting a lot of like aggro vibe
Yeah,
coming from you.
and Anthony Perkins had a very troubled life in many respects, in a way that Roddy did not. Roddy walked away from drama when it came to his own life. He was not interested in being tragic on any level. And he certainly had his opportunity. He had the classic stage mother. The family spent all his money. He was gay in an industry that didn't love that. And, his first big love was Montgomery Clift, who certainly shows what the
Fair.
trajectory of, you could go that direction. But I think with Roddy, there was just a pragmatism to him that permeated his characters as well. It was a kind of like, we're all going to work together and make the best of this. Aren't
Yeah.
we? Aren't we? Come on. And then they do.
I love it. I want to start transitioning to talking about the film. Lord Love a Duck. It's directed by George Axelrod, based on the 1961 novel by Al Hine, which is out of print, and I found very little information about the original book. So I have no idea how different, if at all, it is from the source material. So I'd be interested to find out in a second if you know more about the book. But
I don't, unfortunately. I'll tell you that up front. Spoiler
no
alert.
one does. But it tells the story of a teenage boy. Roddy McDowall was 36 when he made this movie. Teenage boy named Alan Musgrave, who makes this Faustian bargain with this girl that he is in love with, Barbara Ann Green, played by Tuesday Weld, to give her whatever she wants. And that starts with her wanting to infiltrate this rich girl clique by getting 12 cashmere sweaters and learning how to manipulate her father in a very bizarre orgasmic sequence that we will talk about. And then it culminates eventually with murder. And of course, Alan is telling the story from jail as he's dictating how he got into this mess that he is in. I've seen this movie a couple of times. It's a movie that you would think looks and sounds like a Roger Corman movie, but Roger Corman did not actually make it. George Axelrod was best known as a playwright, had written the script for the original 7-Year Itch on Broadway, and this was his first feature. And it's wild.
That's not quite accurate. This was his first feature as a director.
Yeah, right. That's what I meant. Yeah.
Okay, as a screenwriter, he was all over the place with
He was one
Manchurian
of the
Candidate, Breakfast at Tiffany's,
highest paid screenwriter, I think, at that time.
yeah.
First feature as a director. It's a wild movie. I've read, I think Jonathan Rosenbaum wrote that he compared the film to Day of the Locusts in, quote, its savagery and satirical insight. I've read articles talking about how this is a commentary on the American West, about how this is a commentary on celebrity. It's just, and I can see all of those things. You can make the argument for all of them, but it really is a movie that I think, having seen Pretty Poison before this and not particularly liking that, but they are both Tuesday Weld centric Devil's Bargain type of movies. I prefer this one in the sense that if you're watching it as a satire, it's a really sad movie about a young poor girl who is struggling in her home life, who this guy tries to save her life and it just goes completely off the rails. I mean, I know that Roddy McDowall was cast first. Do you know what attracted him to this project in the beginning?
He and George were friends, so he knew about it. He loved the idea of trying something different. Don't forget, everyone was sort of chasing the elusive new audience for cinema in America.
Teens.
Like, how are we going to reach these people? By no means is this a perfect movie.
No.
It's kind of a mess in a lot of ways, but it's a wonderful mess. And Lola Albright, who picked up an award at the Berlin Film Festival as Best Actress for this. I don't think that was on anyone's vision board at the time, that it was going to be like that kind of success creatively or whatever. But she is kind of amazing and heartbreaking in the movie, and kind of a central piece of what the engine, as it were, narratively, where you see the power of George Axelrod's ability to sort of notice things. In Tuesday Weld's very first monologue, when she's talking about the construct of the narrative, is that two old high schools have been consolidated and everyone's coming together at this brand new super duper deluxe high school. And Tuesday Weld was kind of the queen of the school that got knocked down. And now she feels like no one knows who she is and she's no one. And she's so plaintive when she talks about feeling like she's nobody. No one will know who she is. And it's like, if no one knows who I am, I don't exist. And when you talk about something that relates to our current moment in the world, you can see Tuesday Weld as this influencer, and and Roddy is kind of this max influencer on his own right. And you can see these characters existing in our world today, fully realized.
Tuesday Weld, I read, modeled and was given instruction to kind of hone her performance akin to Marilyn Monroe. And of course, George Axelrod had worked on Bus Stop, the Marilyn film. And I saw, having just watched Bus Stop the day before, I could definitely read this as a movie that's about Marilyn Monroe, even though it's not about Marilyn Monroe, because this really is the story of a Marilyn Monroe-esque figure, albeit in high school, that is essentially controlled by a manager who is kind of telling her what to do. She's having to play on the affections of numerous men. And I've read somebody go so far as to say that, like, the one guy, that her dad is the Jim Dougherty, the first husband, and the other guy is the DiMaggio. Like, people go deep in the weeds. One of the big complaints I have about the movie is that her and Roddy have such a great chemistry together. He's kind of a weirdo. He's hiding in a tree in the first scene. She's baton twirling and he steals her baton, and that's how their relationship develops. He tries to hypnotize her in the first 2 minutes, and she's into it the whole time. Like, they have this affection for each other. And once the movie starts to see her rise, that connection kind of is severed. And I wanted more of them together. I wanted more of that scheming between the two of them. Tuesday Weld also just doesn't, much like Roddy, I don't think doesn't get enough love. She chose to walk away from Hollywood, has,
Yeah.
been out of the game for longer than she was in it at this point. But they're so good together. And what's fascinating, and I'd love to get your take on it, is watching this. The movie ends with him declaring that he's done this for love. And yet, there is this really like asexual vibe out of all the men that she is involved with. He's not trying to get into her pants throughout the majority of the movie. It's just kind of this dynamic where it's a pure love. The fact that she is this beautiful thing that deserves to have beautiful things is the vibe I got. I'm curious how you took their dynamic in the film.
Well, in going back to the Marilyn sort of idea, I think there's something very powerful, perhaps, in looking at almost the emptiness of the male gaze that creates that thing. And how little it has to do with actual sexuality or actual love. There's something niggling in the back of my head from what you said to think like, gosh, there may be even more going on here than I thought about, because it is so weirdly asexual. But the way she reacts with all men is so not sexual, really. It's so performative.
Yeah.
I wonder how much of that is intentional and how much of that is George Axelrod is like a straight guy who's like not really into looking at things from a female perspective. If he were, I don't think he would have cast Martin West as the object of her affections, because
The
he's
college guy, quote unquote. Again, everybody looks like they're
what is he?
20 years older.
Well, what is he, 50? I mean, he
Yeah.
doesn't even like read his like
He
like
takes his shirt off in this love scene, and there's just so much hair on this man that I'm like, you are making me think that you definitely have a second family at home. This might be a third. I don't even really
yeah,
know.
I mean, this is body like hair on his back. No way was this like anything that an 18-year-old girl would have been like, oh my God, he's so
No.
hot.
Yeah,
Like,
no.
and
This
so,
goes beyond daddy issues at this point.
yeah, I'm not sure how much of that is the cluelessness of a straight man in Hollywood who is in charge of everything and with his cigar ordering everyone around and just not really that clued in, or if it's completely intentional. I don't know enough.
I don't know. Axelrod is an interesting figure. You look at the films, the stage plays, and the scripts that he's worked on. The 7-Year Itch, vastly different, mind you, than the stage play that he wrote. Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter? He disassociated from the movie. Bus Stop is kind of similar in the sense that it is the story of a woman that is being chased relentlessly by a man who is just the biggest boorish buffoon
And then
you would ever meet.
ultimately, we're supposed to kind of root for them to be
Yeah.
together. And you're
Yeah.
like, "Whoa, ew."
So
It's like that movie As Good as It Gets, when in the end, Helen Hunt gets Jack Nicholson, and you're like, why are you punishing her? What did she ever do to you?
it does make me wonder if Axelrod had some sort of interest in the bizarre sexual politics that women have to navigate, or that men get. I don't know. Maybe I'm giving him too much credit. In the sequences where she is kind of moving through the men in her life, the sweater sequence, which I mean has popped up in so many places as one of the most bizarre sequences. She's told by her friend, the equally voluptuous Lynn Carey, McDonald Carey's daughter.
Yeah.
She's utterly gorgeous, by the way. She's like 6 feet tall. She looks like a model. Of course, after this would post for Penthouse magazine and did some music work. She's still with us. I find her to be fascinating. After I watched this movie, I had to Google Lynn Carey. She looks like she's 30.
Look,
she's
everybody pops on screen.
Yeah.
The psychiatrist in that early scene, that's the actress who plays Sybil's mother, the evil mother of all time with Sally Field. And you can see, like, she's riveting. She has this little sequence, and the acting throughout is just like,
it's so good, and everybody commit.
Yeah.
Barbara Ann gets told if she wants to join this club, she needs to get 12 cashmere sweaters. And of course, Alan's like, call your dad, guilt him into giving you this stuff. Her dad, played by Max Showalter. If you've seen, 16 Candles and you want to see Molly Ringwald's grandpa go nuts over his daughter modeling sweaters, enjoy. But it is this like 3-minute sequence of Tuesday Weld
It
coming
goes
out.
on and on
It goes
and
on
on.
and
You're
on.
just like, will this ever end? Like it's like, oh my God.
It
It's so
eventually
uncomfortable.
devolves like, hey, the titles of the sweaters are just filthy, like in the
Yeah.
grand scheme of things. And the way Tuesday Weld is saying them is just utterly like, okay, this is your dad. But then it devolves into just like a minute of him, Max Showalter, grunting and her moaning, and you're just
Yeah.
like, what is this sequence? Is this art? Is the camera just like going? We just did an Elaine May tribute, and we're talking about Elaine May's choices. I would love to know about George Axelrod, his cinematographer, just like letting this cook for 3.5 minutes.
Well, I do think there is something to George Axelrod being pretty aware of what he was doing with sexual politics. And I also know that his wife, Joan, because they were friends for the rest of their lives together. And Joan Axelrod was a brilliant, smart, funny woman. She was not arm candy for George Axelrod, and I do think he had something to say. I'm not entirely sure I like what he may have been saying, but he definitely had something to say.
100%. I think that's the overall thing of the movie. There's a lot of things that he's saying, but are they being said well? I think is the biggest issue. He's got a lot of disparate ideas. So there's a whole plot point. I talked about this being a Roger Corman movie that Roger Corman didn't make. There is a character that I feel is kind of Corman-esque. This director that is
Yeah.
only known for making films with
Bikini
the word
movie.
bikini in them, that Barbara Ann starts trying to work with. So I think he's commenting on a lot of different things, including teen culture and young women on the verge. But I think that we talked about Lola Albright as the mother, Marie. I get why she got the award. She's
I
so
do too.
brilliant.
It's an astonishing performance.
It's such a great and tragic performance. And again, the Monroe vibes, I think, are very, very
Yeah.
prevalent. She's a cocktail waitress. And of course, her daughter is ashamed of her being a cocktail waitress. So it kind of culminates with Barbara Ann's going to marry this super old dude who's not an old dude, but he old.
He's supposed to be 20.
20 my foot. Ruth Gordon's his mother, and I just needed to start doing some math at that point. I was like, ma'am, when did you have this man? But Ruth Gordon is his mother. Ruth Gordon comes to the house to see her, and Barbara Ann has kind of sold her family as her father is dead. And Marie, Lola Albright's character, does not realize that this is the mother of her soon-to-be son-in-law, and starts going on about how her husband owes money, and it's not her fault. She's dressed in this little corset thing with a tail on the back, which I think that sequence is the highlight of the movie for me. These women of different generations, different social classes coming together. The way Ruth Gordon just like derisively says, "Is that a tail?" is perfect. First, there's an air of tragedy in the sense that Marie does care about her daughter, realizes she's ruined her chances at getting married, and in a very weirdly Marilyn-esque sequence starts calling men in her life to try to talk about how she's over 40, she doesn't know what she's doing, and then ultimately commits suicide. Watching this movie, I'm like, wait a minute, we just went down some paths. We had like sweater orgasms just a couple of minutes ago. Now we have this really tragic tale of, and the way I think McDowall, to bring it back to Roddy, plays the sequence when he tells Barbara Ann, like, you need to drink this.
Yeah.
Don't touch anything so that it looks like an accident so that you'll get the insurance money. It's not malicious. I think that's the brilliance of his performance, is that he's not telling her to do this because he's evil or he had something to do with it. It's the sense that he is continuing to be this kind of dark guardian angel to help her get what she needs.
Well, I think that George Axelrod almost believes that Roddy's character is behaving logically and pragmatically for the times in which we live. Axelrod is on record talking about this is his hateful letter to his teenage children, that it's Dr. Strangelove meets Love
Andy
Finds
Hardy.
Party. I think he really is wanting to say something about modern culture being empty. I think he did feel that very strongly. Where he has a kind of fearlessness is just saying, okay, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna go for it. And I'm going to have this death, which is about, I don't know, maybe 2/3 the way through the movie. And I think something like that. And it's a major shift into going, okay, wait a minute. Like, everything that happened before seemed to not matter. Like, he beat up the original football star guy, like beat the crap out of him, and he couldn't play football for high school anymore. But it was kind of off camera. We didn't really see anybody actually suffer. And now we're seeing someone suffer.
You're totally right on about the time period, too. I don't think that gets discussed enough. So the full quote from Axelrod to Peter Bart in 1965 was, I'm not really sure why I'm making this picture. Maybe I'm just trying to get revenge on my own teenagers. Lord Love a Duck will not be made specifically for the teenage market, but teenagers will probably dig it. It puts everything down: society, vulgarity, adolescence. Teenagers like being put down. And I think that's really interesting. This is coming in 66. Civil rights movement is still about 2 years, at least the high point of it.
Yeah.
Vietnam is starting to bubble up. We're not mired in quote unquote the 60s in the time period that we think of, but he really is, I think, emphasizing this growing venality and apathy about teens that are just like coming out of the 1950s, this time of perceived affluence and getting what they want. And eventually that's all going to come crashing down as the death toll of young people starts to rise with Vietnam. And then eventually they all just tune in and drop out, so to speak, in the 1970s. So I think he's really trying to put his finger on the pulse of this transition of teens specifically not wanting the path of their parents, but ultimately wanting to just kind of do their own thing. And if that makes them selfish, well, or at least I think he's saying he thinks they're selfish.
In terms of what might have been, I wish he had found a little bit more affection for his characters.
Yeah.
I think satire works best when there's some love in it.
100.
And I think this was very much a kind of burn the place down kind of thing for him. I think if he had found a little bit of affection for the current mode of the current mood in the American culture, I think it would have gone a long way in making the film maybe make its point in a way that could resonate a little bit stronger.
Yeah, he said that he was inspired by Richard Lester, stuff like A Hard Day's Night and The Knack, and those are fun movies.
Yeah,
I think that's
this is
the
not
thing.
a fun movie.
This is not a fun movie. He talked in the LA Times in 65. He called it, quote, pop porn or dirty Disney. It may yet give bad taste a bad name. And I think that says something about, weirdly enough, I think Gen Z would really be into this film.
Absolutely.
Because
and it's so meta. I mean, it's so meta. Like,
yeah, because I think that they would understand Barbara Ann and Alan's desires, because Gen X and older talk about Gen Z being so out of touch. They only care about themselves and their own happiness. Well, this is very much a movie about two characters kind of questing for their own happiness, as little as it is, and kind of going out of the way, going to vast extremes in order to achieve that. Gen Z might oddly be into this movie in a way.
It's funny that when we generalize about generations, it can be a little reductive. And I'm not talking about generalizing from an artistic standpoint. I mean, from an actual human standpoint.
Sure.
Like, everybody's doing their best, you know? It's like everybody's just trying to get through the day. Whether it's Gen Z or whether it's go back to the boomers or the greatest generation, if any of them are still alive. everyone is just trying to make sense out of a world that has never made sense. We look at the past and we imagine that everybody knew what their place in the world was once. No, they didn't. They were just as clueless in the 1930s as they were in the 40s and 50s and 60s. There are a million ways that you could look around you and imagine that everyone else has it all together and I don't. What's wrong with me? Now we do that on social media. Everybody's got it together and I'm the outlier. I'm the one that doesn't have it all together. I'm the one that can't figure it out, that can't figure out how to be successful or find love like everyone else is supposed to have it, or whatever it is. All the things that we're told that we're supposed to want and that everyone around us makes look easy. And Gen Z gets a real, from my generation, gets a real hard time as if they're doing anything different. They're not. They're just trying to find their way.
100%. We kind of have been giving guff to the age gaps of the characters here. So Roddy McDowall took a 10-year hiatus, almost 10-year hiatus, and returned in the 60s with...
Well, no, there was never a hiatus. I mean, he was on television constantly. He
television,
was on
yes,
Broadway constantly.
from film. I mean,
But
he
from
took a break
film,
from, yeah.
He was off film screens for 8 years.
8 years, yeah.
But he was very present in people's minds.
Oh yeah, he did TV.
So,
he was on the stage. I think he had done Camelot, which was a big deal. But he did take that 8-year gap from film work, and then in '63 does Cleopatra. He has this 8-year break, and he comes back. I'm curious. There is that child star period that he had, and then this adult. I think that's often hard for child stars. They talk about going through the awkward years on screen. What fueled that decision to kind of eschew films for those 8 years, and how did he navigate that transition in from childhood to adulthood? And yet he was still playing teenage parts, I think, for a long time, even though he was in his 30s.
There are a lot of factors to Roddy's successful transition from old famous child actor to famous adult actor. He ran away from home. He went to New York to get away from his parents and to learn how to act. He understood that what had made him incredibly powerful as a child actor would not sustain into an adult career. Because, I mean, there are lots of ways to talk about it technically, but essentially so much of his childhood career was built around him just responding authentically in the moment as the camera pushes in for the giant close-up of his giant eyes. That there was a power to that was extraordinary. Maureen O'Hara still calls his work in How Green Was My Valley the finest child performance in the history of film. And I think there's an argument to be made for that. But when you're playing adult characters who lie, who subterfuge, who have long speeches, it takes a different kind of technique than just the ability to kind of respond authentically in the moment. And he realized, because he looked at his performances in the Monogram movies, and he did some extraordinary work in some of those films. He really did. One of them that's my favorite, called The Steel Fist, that is set, he's kind of going against an Iron Curtain kind of country and trying to get his way out of the country. But he's very much figuring out, like, how do I do this? How do I do this? And what happened is that he fell in love. He needed to become an adult. He needed to learn how to act. And all of those things pointed him to New York. It was also a lot cheaper to live in New York. They sold off the big family home that they could no longer afford, and he had to take care of his parents. He was helping his sister, who he was very close to, and who was not on firm footing when it came to supporting herself. And it turned out that both from a standpoint of being able to do theater, but also in New York, where the center of television was in the 50s. It was the golden age of anthology television. Now, his stardom was a big commodity in that arena. And like it made a big difference to the Chrysler Playhouse and the GE Playhouse and Playhouse 90 and all of those millions of shows to have Roddy McDowall, who was a genuine above the title star, be on television in their shows. And he was able to cobble together a living. He was able to learn how to act again. He was able to be on Broadway in shows that didn't necessarily run forever, weren't smash hits. It was like his form of repertory theater. Was all of these parts. He was a poor Mexican immigrant, which was not typecasting and is not a casting decision that we would make happily today, but was not an unusual decision to make in the 1950s. Thankfully, he never did blackface, thank God.
Yes.
Because nobody asked him to. I'm sure he would have if someone had asked him to.
He's one of those that kind of like Madonna had reinvented, or at least had a second, third, fourth life.
Over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And very often by manifesting it. I mean, those are not the words he would have used. When it came to Camelot, the part that he played wasn't even a star part, but he knew everybody involved and he was like, I'm going to be in this show. I am going to be in this show. I see it. I see it succeeding. I am going to do this. And between the creators of the show and Julie Andrews and Richard Burton and everybody else, he was like, I'm going to be in this show.
I mean, it's amazing once he gets into the late 60s, and does Planet of the Apes. That was a huge thing. And continued to work in film and television in a time when a lot of actors, even going into the 1980s, television was seen as a step down. He was just kind of blending both, and I mean, continued working until the late 90s. I mean, I remember as a child being like, when they were like, Roddy McDowall is Mr. Soil in Bug's Life, I was like, oh, it was very much a big deal. Where do you think Lord Love-a-Duck fits in his oeuvre? It was not a financial success. Axelrod, of course, has a great quote where he says, quote, I can't imagine why it wasn't a hit. It got no reaction. I couldn't get anybody in the theaters to see it. Gene Siskel told me, God, I love Lord Love-a-Duck. I said, where were all you guys when I couldn't sell any tickets? It was not a success. Axelrod, of course, kept working, though. It didn't really diminish him.
No, and so did Roddy. I mean, in 1965, 66, 67, there was a minute and a half when Roddy was poised to become a movie star again. He made 7 movies, I think, in 65, 66.
Jeez.
All of them flopped. The truth is, they were some very interesting movies, but all of them flopped. Like, we'll go this direction, and we'll go that direction, we'll go that direction. Careers are not as, maybe Madonna's is because she's a superstar, but most careers that last for 60 years, like Roddy's did, it's just, you just keep trying. It's not some amazing, like, orchestrated plan. It's just, you say yes a lot, you hope for the best, and you work very, very, very hard. And he was shooting it, and Elizabeth Taylor was shooting, I think she was shooting Taming of the Shrew. So she was in Italy, he was in England when Montgomery Clift died. Arguably, Elizabeth Taylor and Roddy McDowall were the 2 most important people in Montgomery Clift's life. They were not at his funeral because they were working. And that's what you did. Though you're not going to put 140 people, their jobs at risk or whatever, by just like closing down the production to go because of your personal loss. I think that's why in the entertainment business, you call people civilians who don't work in it, because you think of it that way. It's like a war. And Roddy took every job, he took it completely seriously and felt, particularly as he got older and was thought of as kind of the grand source of old Hollywood or whatever, he felt like he had a role to play, to be an example and to show younger generations, this is how we do this. This is what you've signed up for. And it's a very special thing, and treat it like it's a very special thing.
I always joke about stars that I think would have done well on social, and Shelley Winters is usually my go-to. Like I feel like she would have had a blast on like Twitter and Instagram. I feel like Roddy too, as a guy who was constantly adapting and embracing new mediums. I feel like he would have just like ate on Instagram. Like he would have had a blast.
Absolutely had a blast, and it would have been all joyful, which to me, the power of his life story is in the power of joy and kindness and positivity. It doesn't have to be like a treacly kind of, it's all joy. It's not like that. But you look for, what can you make out of something, and what can you make out of this? He would not have torn anybody down. He would not have torn apart other people's projects. He was never like that, and I respect that. I still work in television, I work in theater, and I am sometimes astonished by some of my friends who will say really nasty things about other people's projects online. There's a way to make people engaged and interested that isn't about going for the low blow, that isn't about tearing all of your friends and coworkers apart, because it all comes back. And it isn't just about like not wanting to make enemies or something or burn bridges. It's about not wanting to tear down this thing that we all care about so much, that just matters so much. Don't.
Yeah. I totally agree. Totally agree. Well, I'm glad that your book exists. Roddy McDowall, An Actor's Life from How Green Was My Valley to Lassie to Planet of the Apes. Samuel Garza Bernstein, thank you so much for wanting to chat about this weird movie, about Roddy, about all of it. I'll have a link to where people can buy the book in my show notes. But for people that want to follow you online and find out what you have coming up, where can they get in touch?
Embarrassingly, the best thing is starring Samuel Garza Bernstein. It is so embarrassing. See, what happened is I had a book called Starring Joan Crawford.
Right.
And, some of the media about that was dovetailed into it. And the publicist was like, well, why not just call it this? And now, like, anytime I have to actually say it out loud, I'm like so embarrassed for myself.
I feel that.
Doing some events in early June in Los Angeles with the Motion Picture Television Fund at the Country Home there, and at Book Soup, and the book's available everywhere.
Awesome. And of course, people can follow me at Kristen K. Lopez, unless it's Instagram, because I can't get that handle at Kristen Lopez 88. And my website, The Film Maven, is where you can listen and watch episodes here, as well as reading my thoughts on entertainment and all sorts of fun stuff. We have all the podcast stuff up top if you missed that. Of course, we're on all social media at Ticklish Biz, unless it's Twitter, where we're at ticklish_biz, and our Patreon is always patreon.com/ticklishbiz. Be sure to check out the main feed. Depending on when this goes up, we have our Marilyn Monroe top 3 coming up, our episode on Cape Fear, the original, in anticipation of the new TV show. Yes, there is a TV show version of Cape Fear coming. We'll be back with a new episode in 2 weeks. Till then.